The Pittsburgh Steelers season is alive. It's well. It comes down to week 18, but Mason Rudolph is driving this train, and man, it looks like it might stay on the tracks just a little bit longer. Hope feels good, and this Pittsburgh Steelers offense is rocking. Now it's just a matter of how far can they take it with, again, Mason Rudolph steering the ship. What's going on, everybody? I'm Noah Strackbein. Thank you for jumping on to Steelers to Go, your daily to-go cup of Pittsburgh Steelers news and analysis. Find us on youtube.com/All Steelers Talkers. Subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. The Pittsburgh Steelers, they defeat the Seattle Seahawks 30-27, back-to-back 30-point games for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Week 17 ends with playoff hopes very much so alive, and really an answer to a question the Pittsburgh Steelers have been looking for all season. It was somewhat answered last week. You got a glimpse of, okay, there's some hope. Things feel good. Maybe, just maybe, the Pittsburgh Steelers have finally found their quarterback. Week 17 against the Seahawks. That answer is a definitive. It is yes. And Mason Rudolph is the guy. And by no means, and I mean no means, should the Pittsburgh Steelers be headed back to Kenny Pickett or anybody else in week 18 if they want to make the most out of one final shot to get back into the wild card. The Pittsburgh Steelers right now, they have a 54% chance to make the postseason according to the New York Times simulator. If they beat the Baltimore Ravens in week 18, who claim the 1 seed in the AFC, so things are looking good for the Steelers right now. It's got to be, at least you have to believe it's going to be Tyler Huntley and a bunch of backups against the Pittsburgh Steelers starter, a team that just scored 34 and then 30 in back-to-back weeks, who have had their best 2 offensive performances to date, and who seemingly have a quarterback right now who are red hot on both sides of the ball and who know that their backs are against the wall. Say what you will, but Mike Tomlin always coaches the best when his teams are backed into a corner. Gotta have belief that one could turn into a victory, but we'll get there in a second. They also have, at least a hope, the Jacksonville Jaguars fall to the Tennessee Titans or the Buffalo Bills fall to the Miami Dolphins. I want to say both are possible. Not going to say either are likely, although the Miami Dolphins loss to the Baltimore Ravens means they have to fight for the 2 seed. A win over the Buffalo Bills claims that. Chances are they're keeping their starters in, and they're going to try their hardest to get that number 2 seed and head into the postseason with the Week 18 victory. So it's up to the Pittsburgh Steelers to win against the Baltimore Ravens. And the best time to do that, the best way to do that, the best way to go about doing that is to make 0 changes and say, Mason Rudolph is our dude. Stop opening it up for debate. Stop leaving it as, oh, Kenny Pickett is hurt. Maybe the door is open. Maybe he could return. We'll monitor him throughout the week. There's no monitoring. There should be no headlines. It should just be plain and simple. Mike Tomlin walks into his press conference on Tuesday and says, hey, we'll see where we go from here and what comes after the season. But for right now, this is Mason Rudolph's job. It will be his job if we make the playoffs. And Kenny Pickett, for right now, is our number 2. Because that gives you the best security blanket that you will want to have, because you want to have Kenny Pickett on the field in week 18 and especially in the postseason. But it gives you your best number 1 quarterback, which is Mason Rudolph, and it is head and shoulders above Kenny Pickett that it is Mason Rudolph. Let me read off some stats from week 17. This is as complete of a game as it possibly gets for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Mason Rudolph completed 18 of 24 passes for 274 yards. Najee Harris rushed 27 times for 122 yards and 2 touchdowns. Should have been 3, but he fell on the last one to make sure that the Pittsburgh Steelers could take a knee and end the game. Jaylen Warren, 13 rushes, 75 yards, 1 touchdown. Deontay Johnson, 4 receptions, 76 yards. Pat Freiermuth, 3 receptions, 44 yards. Jaylen Warren, 4 receptions, 23 yards. George Pickens, 7 receptions, 131 yards. Everybody credited the offensive line after the game. They got the game ball. You can't blame anybody there because the offensive line has played great these last 2 games, and you have to question that too. Is it because the pocket presence of the quarterback is just that much better, that they feel more comfortable? They don't have to shift the pocket as much. It's not as elaborate. It's just plain and simple. Protect your quarterback and he will make throws, because if that's the case, they're playing much better than they were the first 15 weeks of the season than they are the last 2. And Mason Rudolph, he's staying up for the most part. It allows him to see the field better. It allows him to make his reads better. It allows him to go to second and third and sometimes fourth options much better than Kenny or Mitch did all season long. This team is alive. This team is well. This defense looks good. This offense looks fantastic. I mean, I don't know how we got here. I don't know how the Pittsburgh Steelers somehow pulled this off. I don't know if it was just blatant ignorance to totally ignore Mason Rudolph the last 2 years, or if it really does hold true that the last time he was out there, we probably should have paid attention that nobody was out there with him, that he was working with a banged-up Juju Smith-Schuster and Dante Moncrief and a rookie Deontay Johnson and a banged-up James Conner, and Nick Vannett at tight end and a banged-up Vance McDonald trying to replace him and all these things. Maybe we should have paid attention to it. Maybe nobody did. If that's the case, I'm sorry, Mason Rudolph. I'm sorry for all the bad things I've said. I'm sorry for all the criticism that me and many others have put on you or towards you. And I'm very glad that you are getting another opportunity. And the Pittsburgh Steelers should be very glad that Mason Rudolph is getting another opportunity. People are trying to say this is the Steelers' Joe Flacco. I believe it is. I believe sometimes just being cool, calm, and collected is enough to make a difference in the NFL. Mason Rudolph already had the skill set. He already had the arm talent. Those were never a question. It was never, can Mason Rudolph throw the deep ball? Can Mason Rudolph make reads? Can Mason Rudolph, whatever you want to say, fill in the sentence here. It was just a matter of Mason Rudolph can't win. Mason Rudolph isn't getting the job done. Mason Rudolph isn't good enough on Sundays to be a starting quarterback in the NFL. 7 years into the NFL, he's good enough to be a starting quarterback on Sundays in the NFL for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Maybe we were all wrong. Maybe Mike Tomlin was wrong. Who knows? What we do know is moving forward, and that's all we could talk about now, is moving forward. What comes next? What does tomorrow bring and the day after that? And it should be Mason Rudolph. No questions asked. What it means for Kenny Pickett in the future, we'll see. Because my thought going into this game was Mason Rudolph would not return to the Pittsburgh Steelers. It will still be Kenny Pickett's job in the offseason. There's no reason to make this bigger than it actually is. Mason Rudolph's going to go to Minnesota or Las Vegas or Denver, somebody who needs a veteran quarterback who's going to look for one, and Mason Rudolph's going to be there to try and take the job. Meanwhile, in Pittsburgh, it's going to be Kenny Pickett's job to lose, and they'll see who they can bring in behind him and possibly compete with him, but really he's got to lose that job. As I sit here today, depending on how Week 18 goes, Mason Rudolph is the guy that you give the ball to moving forward, and you hope he comes back. And if he can win you a playoff game on top of that, there is zero reason to say, oh, but Kenny Pickett moving forward. At that point, it is Mason Rudolph is the guy. He's Brock Purdy'd his way over Trey Lance, a.k.a. Kenny Pickett. That's the situation the Steelers are approaching. It's not there yet. It's very, very close, though. And Week 18 is maybe the deciding factor in that, depending on how Jacksonville and Miami turn out. But for right now, you got to look at Mason Rudolph in a light that says he could be the starting quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers in 2024, and that is wild to say, especially for how far this whole situation has come with Mason Rudolph and with the quarterback situation as a whole. But that's where they are. And Week 18 decides so much. But heading into Week 18, the decision is very easy. Mason is your guy. Try to get Kenny Pickett healthy so he could be your number 2. Don't cause any drama. Don't make this bigger than it is. Just say very simply, Mason Rudolph gives us our best opportunity to win right now. There is one game left between us and the postseason. We are not in there. We do not have time to mess around at quarterback. We do not have time to take chances or risks or look ahead any further than Sunday in Baltimore. And with that said, Mason Rudolph is our guy. From there, we'll see what happens.